A Chat with Pat.
Yes, and it is a Thursday, and so that means we are talking to Joan Watson. Joan Watson is an author, a speaker, an all-around terrific woman, and I am glad to call her friend. Welcome, Joni. How you doing?
I am great, Pat. Thanks so much.
No problem. Hey, we are moving through your book, Making a Pilgrimage, a Companion for Catholics. And again, I would encourage anyone to get this book. You don't have to be a world traveler in order to understand it and what it's all about, because life itself is a pilgrimage. But Joni, we're getting toward the end of the book, and we're talking about other shrines and sites, because we talked about the Holy Land, we talked about Rome. You give great history here, great insights to things. But last week we started by looking at the Camino, right? The path to St. James's tomb, St. James the Greater. Yes. I think we ended around the part where we were just going to get talking about the royals, the idea of who made pilgrimages to St. James's tomb. Last week we kind of talked about how we got to that place where there was the Camino, but can you kind of tell us, like, who were the royalty that ended up doing this pilgrimage, and why did they do it?
Yeah, so I think it's important when we look at the Camino to realize that the Camino is such an interesting image of the church, because everybody did it. And there were all walks of life. There were all vocations. We have saints and sinners and royals and poor people and priests and religious. Everybody walks the Camino. And today, everyone does still walk the Camino. Mm-hmm. Like, it's the ragtag group, similar to Canterbury Tales, right? It's everybody. And it's such a beautiful image of what the Pilgrim Church is, because it's an even playing field, right? Right. We're all walking the Camino. We're all sitting in the pews at Mass. And it's in the eyes of the Lord, in a sense, we are all royal, right? We are all sons and daughters of the King. And I think the Camino, pilgrimage in general, just levels the playing field and makes us remember that we are all brothers and sisters on this journey. And we have the same struggles, really, right? Mm-hmm. We have the same temptations. Yep. And we have the same joys. So there were many royals that have walked the Camino in the past, especially the kings and queens of Spain, but also like Edward I of England, King St. Louis IX of France, who also then goes on crusade as well. Isabella and Ferdinand, the great Catholic king and queen of Spain that we know well because of the discovery of the New World. And one of the most famous pilgrims is St. Elizabeth of Portugal, who we see often depicted with roses in her cloak, because she was married to the king and he didn't really like how she fed the poor, and he challenged her one day and she opened her cloak and there wasn't bread for the poor but roses. So often if we have stained glass windows of her here, or we think about her as a queen, we think of her as this charitable, her charitable work to the poor. But interestingly enough, in Portugal, she is really depicted as a pilgrim instead, because after her husband's death, she takes a very famous pilgrimage to the tomb of St. James. She makes her Camino. And to this day, one of the routes of the Camino is not just one road, it's many roads. And one of the famous routes is the Portuguese route, which follows her footsteps. And many of the towns were the same towns where she stopped, where miracles happened and their churches built in honor. And so it's really beautiful that when you're walking the Camino, in a sense, we're all in even playing field, but you're also walking in the footsteps of these great saints like Elizabeth. Yeah.
So, Joni, I want to ask you this, because I kind of know about the Camino, but I haven't studied it like you have. So, sure. You say there are many roads. So, can you kind of give us an idea, where do these roads start? Is there a short route that people can do in a shorter amount of time, longer routes? How does this work?
Yeah. So, people who've walked the Camino will always say the Camino starts wherever you start, right? Your journey starts where you decide, okay, I'm going to walk the Camino.
Right.
There are several routes. There are hundreds of routes, but there are a few very well-traveled routes that are marked really well. Okay. And so, if you right now are discerning, I want to walk the Camino, you likely will walk something like the Portuguese route, the Camino Frances, which is named because it traditionally starts in France. the thing about the Camino is, first of all, people were walking from Poland. People have walked from Bohemia. People have walked from Italy, right?
Wow.
So people have walked hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles to the tomb of St. James. They eventually had to regulate the Camino because people were giving it as penance, actually, for sins. That if I, for example, murdered somebody,
right.
That was part of both my punishment and my penance to go on the Camino, which is actually, they find, and we could get into the whole psychology of it, but they find that for healing after trauma and healing after certain events, even modern psychologists actually will sometimes prescribe walking because of what it does for the body, because of what it does for the body, mind. So it's a spiritual and actually like physiological cure for a lot of things in a sense. But people would give the Camino as a penance, but then you had to show something that you actually did it, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
right.
I can't just say, "Oh, Father, forgive me and absolve me now because I went and walked the Camino." So they would regulate it. So it's really the first pilgrimage that the church regulates and says, okay, at certain points you're going to get certain stamps. And when you show those stamps at the church, at the tomb of St. James, we will give you a compostela, a certificate of completion. So to this day, to get the compostela, you have to walk the last 100 kilometers.
Okay.
So these routes have come up because people built hostels and people built things to help the pilgrims who were walking at least 100 kilometers to the tomb. So that's kind of how a famous saying is that Europe was created by pilgrimage. And this idea that all these different countries and all these different walks of life came together, and people came to an understanding of a global community because they met people from all different countries on these roads.
That's amazing.
It's really amazing.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful.
Yeah. And I don't know if I asked you this or not, Joni. Have you done this route?
I have not.
Okay.
It's definitely on my bucket list. I have many friends who have. And, some people will say, I won't do it until I can do, quote, the whole thing. And what they mean is like starting in France or starting in Porto. But I think we want to make sure the perfect doesn't get in the way of the good.
Yeah.
And I would just encourage anybody, like, don't feel like you have to take 4 months off of work to walk the Camino. I've heard transformative stories about people who've done those last 100 kilometers. And so it's definitely on my list to walk at some point.
Well, if you ever get around to it, and I'm still young enough to walk because I'm quite a bit older than you, let me know. I'd love to walk it with you. I'd love to.
I would love that. Okay, let's plan this.
Okay, because St. James holds certainly because of Jim, certainly a great piece in my life. So I want to, and I think
we do Walk with Pat? We could advertise Walk with Pat. And we could have everyone join us.
That's right. Instead of a chat with Pat, it can be a walk with Pat. I like it, Joni. That's great. Well, I want to ask. Oh gosh, I'm not going to ask, but but next week we're going to talk more about like the builders, and I want to hear more about what the builders mean in this book, because there's so much stuff in here that we can delve into. So we're going to get into that next week. But gosh, thanks so much for being with us again, Joni. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Pat. Thanks all. Have a good week.
Bye-bye.